Jnanatirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshormilitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Vipa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaudatri Se Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gauri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishwabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Okay, well, it's been a while since we've been, doing our Bhagavad Gita classes, so thought it would be nice to pick up the thread again. And so we are in the middle of chapter 3 and verse 34 is what I had noted down. Let's see. Okay, so we'll just pick up from verse 34. So we'll chant the verses together like we were doing before. Indriyasyandriyasyarte adadresho vivastito triyornavasha magacheto yasya paripantino. Although the senses are attracted to and repelled by the sense objects, one must not be controlled by these urges, for they are the greatest enemy of the candidate for self-realization. Verse 35. Shreyan sadharmo viguna paradharma sanushthitat swadharme nidanam shreya karo dharmo bhayavaha. Actually, I liked how we were doing before. We read a chunk of verses and we get into the flow. So maybe we'll read up to verse 39. Just get into some flow here. So 36. Arjuna vacha Ratatena prayuktoham papam charati purushaha Anichanapi Vaishneya Baladeva Niyojitaha. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Kamaisha Krodesha Rajaguna Samudbhavaha Vahashano Mahapakma Vityenam Nihavadinam Yumena Riyate Vanir Yata Darsho Malena Cha Yato Benavrito Garbhas Tatatena Dhamavritam Avritam Gyanam Nitena Gyanino Nityavairina Kamarupena Kunteya Vishpurena Nalina Cha. Okay, so we'll go back. Translation for verse 35. Even if it is imperfect, it is better to do one's duty according to one's own nature than to do another's well. Even death in the discharge of one's own duty is better, for to perform another's is dangerous. And we have a commentary here from Srila Sridhar Maharaj. The eternal, super excellent, natural function, dharma of the soul, is pure devotion for Adhokshaja, the transcendental Lord. Therefore, even if this function is somewhat imperfectly attempted by one with external malpractices, such an attempt will be superior to the, in inverted commas, good practices within the material modes of nature and worldly chain of actions and habits foreign to the soul's nature. Even if death occurs during the cultivation of such pure devotion in proper saintly association, it is the bestower of the ultimate good. but in the name of good practices to ignorantly follow another's path, anything other than devotion for the Lord, Dvitya Binivesh, is Bhayavaha, endangering to the spiritual progress of the soul. And then there's a reference to this Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam verse. Bhayam Dvitya Biniveshataha Syad, Ishad Apetasya Viparya Yoshmiti, Tanmayayato Buddha Abhajetam, Bhaktyayakayesham Guru Deva Tatma. A person of fine intelligence will serve with single-minded devotion his Lord, who is his teacher and dearmost friend. But those who have turned away from the Lord adopt the illusory ego of considering the perishable body to be the self, forgetting their true identities. Their consciousness absorbed in secondary pursuits, i.e. mundane objectives, they are always fearful on account of the body and its attachments. So this is maybe you don't have in the Srila Swami Maharaj edition this commentary here. I'm going to keep reading and then we'll go back and we can discuss it now. So verse 36. Arjuna inquired, O descendant of the Rishnis, by what is the living being compelled to commit sinful activities, even unwillingly, as if by force? It's a good question. The Supreme Lord replied, it is the desire, so we're in 37, it is the desire to enjoy the mundane that induces a person to commit sin, and in different situations it produces anger. It is utterly insatiable, extremely malicious, and the worst enemy of the living being in this world. As fire is thinly veiled by smoke, as a mirror is thickly covered with dust, and as the embryo remains completely enclosed within the womb, similarly, this desire covers the consciousness of the living being in these 3 degrees of intensity, according to the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, respectively. Knowledge is covered by desire, the constant enemy of the wise. It burns like an insatiable fire, never satisfied by offerings of butter. So this desire, this is in the sense of, more in this, because desire, there's kind of like there's a range of connotations, right? Desire. But this is speaking more in terms of lust, this calm, Well, we'll finish the chapter and we can, okay, so we'll read from 440 to the end of the chapter. Indriyani manobuddhir asya nishtanamuchyate eteri mohayatisha jnanamaritya dehinam tasmatvam indriyanyado niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajahiyenam jnanaviyananashanam indriyanyapanyahur indriyebhya param manaha manasastu parabuddhir buddhya paratastu sa evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanamatmana jahi satram mahabaho kamadupam durarsadam iti Shri Mahabharate Shakta Sahasriyam Samhitayam Vayasikyam Bhishma Parvani Srimad Bhagavad Gita Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Sambhade Karma Yoga Nama Chityo Jayaha. Okay. 40. It is said that this enemy, desire, dwelling within the senses, mind, and intelligence, covers the perception of the embodied living being and deludes him. Therefore, O noblest of the Bharatas, control your senses and destroy this desire, the embodiment of sin, which destroys both knowledge and realization. It is said by the wise that the senses are superior to matter, the mind is superior to the senses, and the intelligence is superior to the mind, and the soul is superior to even the intelligence. O mighty Arjuna, knowing the soul to be superior to the intelligence, steady the mind with resolute intelligence and destroy the formidable enemy, desire. Okay. So, let's see now. So going back to where we began, this verse 35, it's a very interesting point for discussion. It's quite a bold statement, right? It's better to die doing your own duty than to engage in another duty that is not appropriate for you. It's a very, very strong statement to make. So, what can we take from this? We have our own lessons to learn, right? Ultimately, success is not about achieving something in the external plane, but it's about inner development, right? And inner realization. So what is coming to us in front of us, that is for us to learn a particular lesson, right? A particular teaching. And so to leave that aside for whatever reason, to follow another path, another duty, that won't take us anywhere ultimately. Externally, it may appear we are achieving something, but substantially, there's nothing there. It's not appropriate for us. It's not for us. We are all at particular stages of development. We have to understand. We were touching on this last night, actually, right? That we have to understand what is appropriate for us at a particular time, right? Because everything can change tomorrow, depending on our point of realization. The rules can change, right? It is like we could take the example of raising children, right? One day you may tell them one thing, and another day you may tell them the opposite. Because first they have to learn this lesson, and once they've learned that lesson, then they can develop to something else. They can develop a broader understanding. Like you may tell this example coming into my head, maybe you'll tell your young child not to go in the kitchen, right? Because there are knives around and there's boiling water, and you'll tell the young child, never come into the kitchen, or your tool room where you have, nails and screwdrivers and saws and dangerous equipment. You'll tell the child, never come in this room. There's a big X on this room. But they're not supposed to follow that for their whole life, And if they're, a 30-year-old man saying, "Oh, but my mother told me I can never go in this room," that would be ridiculous. So that lesson was appropriate for them at that particular time. That is best for them to follow that at that time. But then later the rules can change. So this is actually quite an important point, you know, for making genuine advancement in Krishna consciousness. Because we were just discussing this before, that we can, if we want to, we can do anything and we can support from scripture, right? No, I could go and kill someone and I could quote from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, where Krishna says that you can kill the whole world, and if you do it without a hankar, without the false ego, you won't have any result for it. You won't get any karmic results. Right? So I can go and kill somebody, and I can quote from Bhagavad Gita, you know. So we can do anything and we can support, right, from scripture. But we want to be connected with the reality. And in order for that, we need to understand what's appropriate for us at a particular time and circumstance. We have to understand the proper applications of spiritual teachings and understand what's appropriate at a particular time and place. So same thing with our understanding our duty. You know, at any given time, we may have a different duty. So we have to understand what is appropriate at this time, you know, for me. In one particular circumstance, you may have a, you know, myriad of persons involved, and they all have a different duty. You know? Maybe even they're all playing the same team, right? But everyone has to address the situation in a different way according to their position, according to their role, according to their duty. You know? Like Gurudev, he, you know, Gurudev was not happy when he became the Acharya, because the Acharya, someone in the position of Acharya, an Acharya, has a particular role that they're supposed to play. The Acharya is supposed to be like a benevolent father, you know, grandfather even, like forgiving everyone, very harmonious with everyone. But Gurudev liked to be the manager. The manager can be the bad guy. The manager doesn't have to be popular. The manager is just trying to run things, right? And they can't worry about, of course, you know, there must be some degree of, you know, nice behavior, etc. But more important is they're trying to run things according to necessity. That's their duty. And that's what Gurudev liked, you know. He wanted to do the service in the temple as it needed to be done, you know. But then in the position of the Acharya, you know, you have to be more diplomatic, you know. You have to massage people's egos, and you know, it's a much more delicate. You have to compromise more, you know, you have to try to, you know, it's important to, you know, partly for a person's faith, you have to maintain, you know, very, you know, good feeling, you know, good exchange. And so Gurudev, he felt a little frustration when he became the Acharya, because he could not always do or say everything that he wanted. But he understood, you know, this is a different role. Now I have to play a different role. You know? There's also another nice example is one godbrother of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He became Keshav Maharaj, actually. He's the person who gave sannyas to Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada. But so he was a brahmachari. He was a saffron-clad brahmachari in the Gaudiya Math. And he was serving in the Chaitanya Math in Mayapur, Saraswati Thakur's temple. And at that time, like now when you go to Mayapur, it's, you know, Mayapur looks very, it's very, it's very together, you know, it looks very, you know, it's you know, it looks very civilized, you know, there's many beautiful temples, and Navadvip looks a little more rough, actually. If you go like to Paramatala, you know, it looks a little more like village standard, you know. But when you go to Mayapur, it looks more, more wealthy and more organized. But in that time, actually, Mayapur was kind of a rough place. There were a lot of thieves. Like it was kind of a wild place. It was like some type of more like a forest. It was uncultivated. And so the temple there, they had a lot of problems with some of the local people, and in particular there were several persons who they owed something to the temple. They owed some money to the temple, and it was just difficult to get things done because the local people were a little problematic. And so Saraswati Thakur, because Keshav Maharaj, at that time he was Vinod Brahmachari, he had a very strong nature. And so Saraswati Thakur requested him, you please take on the management of this temple, so you can deal with all of these people who are creating problems for the temple. And so then Vinod, he said, if you want me to take on this service, then I will have to remove my saffron cloth. Because, as he said, to deal with these people, I need to be a little rough. Maybe I need to beat some people. And in a saffron cloth, it will not look good. It's not befitting a saffron brahmachari to deal roughly like that with people. So he did that. He removed his saffron for some time, and in his white cloth, he did that service of the of the management. And then later he ended up taking sannyas. Anyway, these are just a few examples that come to mind. We have to understand what is appropriate. What is our duty in a particular circumstance.
But why is it dangerous to do other people's duties?
Why is it dangerous? See, this verse, it has some different layers of meaning. So, what I've been discussing, there's the relative side and the absolute side, right? So what I was discussing now is more on the relative side. On the absolute side, a deeper reading of this verse is what Srila Sridhar Maharaj is pointing out in the commentary. That our real duty is Krishna consciousness, right? Our real duty is service to Krishna. That is on the most fundamental level, that is the real duty of every soul. And so to do anything other than that, it puts one in a dangerous position, from the absolute perspective. Why? Because we are that is the natural function of our soul. And so to do anything that's taking us away from that, to deepen the layers of illusion, of misconception, of Maya, that is endangering for the soul. So that is another way you can see the verse. But you could also apply it in a more of a general sense, that if we are going to do something that is not appropriate for us, it can actually create many problems. For ourselves and for others, even in a very simple sense, people talk about interfering people or busybodies. We say, maybe, I don't know if you have in Hungarian, in English we say a busybody, like someone who likes to get involved in everybody's business. It can create many problems. There's one talk of Srila Sridhar Maharaj where he quotes in English we have this expression, mind your own business. and Srila Sridhar Maharaj quotes that, and he's saying also, we need to know when to mind our own business. not to get involved in everyone else's duty or everyone else's business. You know? It's, you know, it's something you see. I mean, you stayed in the Sokel temple for a long time, so you probably had some experience. And when it's something you really see the importance of when you're staying in a community environment, because it can create problems when you have someone they want to help, but they're getting involved in everything, you know, when actually it's counterproductive, you know. They can actually create more problems, you know, and you know, we have to, of course, it's, you know, in a general sense, it's good that we feel concern for everyone, we're everyone's well-wisher, but we have to know where is the line, right? You know, where is the line to draw?
Any other comments from anyone?
And then on the other hand, another point that's being made in this verse is that, you know, even if you're not doing your own duty perfectly, that's okay. It doesn't matter. No. The point is that you are trying to do that. You know, even if you're making mistakes, and that's okay. That's normal. That's a part of the process. And then this is a famous verse that's being referred to here from Bhagavatam. It's describing the process of, you know, it's describing this, how the soul comes under the influence of illusion. Viparya smriti, because their consciousness is upside down, inside out, because they have turned away from the Lord. They've entered this fearful consciousness, separate from the Lord. Okay. And then Arjuna asks this question, which is a very good question. How is it that, you know, we do things sometimes that we don't actually want to do them, but the mind is compelling us, you know? We are compelled to do things which are not good for us, or not good for anyone, but we can't stop it. It feels familiar. So this is calm. And this, you know, this discussion about calm, it's very interesting, because Gurudev, he gave this very interesting talk about this once, about calm. Because calm, lust, it's a perverted reflection of prema, right? Prema is divine love. Prema is this eagerness to serve the Lord, this intense desire, attachment to the service of the Lord. So that's like the healthy expression of calm. But in this world, it's perverted into this, you know, into lust, you know, and this aggressive, exploitative spirit. And so it's very forceful. It's a very powerful force. Gurudev, he gave this talk where he was talking about this, and he was saying how these two currents, they're flowing like parallel to each other, in this world. And so we're always kind of moving between these two, that current of prema that's taking us towards Krishna, taking us towards the center. And then the current of kama, which is taking us out, to material consciousness and material experience. And in different situations, so this kama, it induces a person to commit sin, and in different situations it produces anger. Because, if we have that calm to enjoy something, but then we can't get it, then we become angry, right? As a result of that. It is utterly insatiable, extremely malicious, and the worst enemy of the living being in this world, because you lose control when you're under the influence of that energy. You lose control. And this analogy is very helpful. These three examples, these three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. It's very helpful. So the mode of goodness, the influence of the mode of goodness is compared to smoke covering the fire. Because there's the smoke is obscuring the fire, but it's not such a strong covering, right? And then the mira covered with dust, it's thicker, And then the embryo in the womb, covered in the womb, is fully covered over. So these are representing the modes of passion and ignorance. So ignorance is the lowest and the most covered position to be in. Yeah, it's a very helpful example. And then this verse 42, Indriyani Paranyahu, this is a very famous verse, and it's very helpful because this is quoted so many times by Srila Govinda Maharaj and Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and it's a very helpful verse because it's like helping us to step back a little bit and to see all these different layers within our body. There's the gross outer physical world, then there's the sensory plane, then there's the mind, the intelligence, and then the Atma underneath those covers. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he discusses, these different, how we can recognize, these different functions within us. The mind is the seat of all sense experience. The senses are the first connection with the outer world, and the senses are collecting information, right? Sight, sound, touch, taste, they're collecting information, they're depositing it with the mind. And he points out how he's like demonstrating the difference between these different aspects, and he points out how if we're not mindful, right, if we're not paying attention, then our senses can be picking up information, but it's not registering, right? Like someone can be talking to us, or something could be burning, but if our mind is very absorbed in something else, we don't pick up on it, right? So the senses are kind of just blindly collecting information, depositing it with the mind. The mind is registering all of this information. And then the mind is mostly the mind is kind of like a 5-year-old toddler. Like The mind doesn't have so much to. The mind doesn't discriminate. The mind is mostly telling us, I like it or I don't like it. So that's why, you see with children, usually it's difficult for them to eat anything that they don't like the taste of, right? Because you can't explain to them, oh, this is very good for you, They only know they like the taste, or they don't like the taste. And maybe you have to give them their medicine coated in candy, sugar, or something like that. And then you also, there's the example of people who struggle with addictions, right? They have lung cancer, but they can't stop smoking. They have high cholesterol, but they can't change their. I mean, we all struggle with that. Maybe not at the level of a serious addiction, but we all have things that we do, we eat, that we know are not good for us, but we can't control it because that's the mind. That's the mental plane. That means our mind is unhinged. The mind is loose. So the mind just deals with like, dislike, or friend, enemy. That's another way it can play out. The mind can create problems in our relationships, because we may, if we're very much, and it's very dualistic, the mind. What's the other word I'm looking for? Binary, right? That's the word, binary. It's very limited in how it perceives things. Oh, this person was nice to me, so they're my friend. This person criticized me, so they're not my friend. And I won't treat them well. Like this type of thing. But then the intelligence is highly discriminating and analytical. And if the intelligence is strong, then it can subdue the mind. Oh, I want to eat this chocolate cake right now, but I have diabetes, so I better not, etc., right? The mind, the intelligence will reason with the mind. Oh, this person was a little rude to me, so I don't want to invite them to my party. But the intelligence will say, oh, you should still be friendly to them, even if they're not always nice to you, etc., etc. The intelligence will reason a little more, try to control the mind. And so this is interesting that this point here, how calm lust is very insidious because it sneaks into all of these different layers. It's in all of these different aspects, so it's hiding there. Yeah, so this outline of these different layers, it's very helpful. And if we kind of sit back, we can look. Oh, what am I? What influence am I under now? Like the mind the senses are controlling me. The mind is controlling me. The intelligence is dictating to me. We can see these different processes, and we can sit back. People talk about mindfulness, right? Just through a simple mind. You don't need to go to Bhagavad Gita even. You don't need to go to, if you practice mindfulness, you can see, oh, I'm actually, the I within me is separate from all these things. These things are playing out on my consciousness, but the I is something else. And then the ahankar, the false ego, is also, it's not mentioned here in Bhagavad Gita, but of course that's the most subtle of the coverings. That ahankar is causing us, the ahankar is the very sense of identity, very subtle, that's causing us to identify with particular circumstances, environment, situations, designations. And then Krishna ends with this rousing advice. O mighty Arjuna, knowing the soul to be superior to the intelligence, steady the minds with resolute intelligence and destroy the formidable enemy, desire. It's so helpful, to like sit back like with this advice and review like all of these things that play out in our consciousness and remind ourselves, who I am is somebody else. It is something more. I am above these things, actually. So that's the end of chapter 3, Path of Action, Karma Yoga, from the conversation of Sri Krishna and Arjuna in Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishad, the Yoga scripture of transcendental knowledge, and Bhishma Parva of Sri Mahabharata, the holy scripture revealed by Srila Vyasadeva in 100,000 verses. Okay. Well, we can stop there, I think. And next time we can pick up in chapter 4. Anyone want to share any thoughts? Let's see how we have time. Oh wow, 5:30. All right. Anyone want to sing? Hari Harayanam Krishna.